Because I was about to just go back to exactly what you just said, but you didn't record, so now
Okay, yeah, no, I can let me reiterate then. Yeah, no,
sorry.
I'll reiterate. No. So generally speaking,
Okay.
we're doing a bone review, right? So we're doing our bone tissue review. And generally speaking, we're talking about long bones. Well, we're talking about skinny bones. They're covered with periosteum, which is connective tissue. It's like connective tissue membrane that also, it carries blood vessels and nerves and stuff in it, through it, that then go into the bone. But it covers all bone surfaces except for articular surfaces, right? So that would be the ends of your long bones where you have articular cartilage, which looks like something like this. So when you have articular cartilage like this at the ends of the long bones, you're not going to have periosteum as well. You're just going to have articular cartilage, and then the periosteum is going to cover the rest of the bone. So for your long bones, that articular cartilage is going to be at either end. And then you will have some short bones, like the bones of your wrist and hands, that will have articular cartilage on them, right? Because those are also synovial joints, right? They are diarthrotic, they're fully movable. So they need articular cartilage so that you don't rub bone on bone. But the flat bones, like of your skull and like your sternum, those don't generally have articular cartilage because they're either fibrous joints, like the sutures of your skull, or they're cartilaginous joints, which is not articular cartilage per se. It's the cartilage that makes up the cartilaginous joint instead. So diaphysis is the shaft, epiphyses are the ends, the metaphyses are the little areas in between the epiphysis and the diaphysis, and you can see that in this image here. So here's the epiphysis, here's the metaphysis from here to here, and the diaphysis. And the reason why the metaphysis comes into play is because you have a metaphyseal artery and a metaphyseal vein, which go into the bone here, which is technically part of the metaphysis. So the metaphyseal artery and metaphyseal vein go in basically in between where the epiphyseal artery and epiphyseal vein go in, and where the nutrient artery and the nutrient vein go in. So also recall these three paired blood vessels that we talked about: the epiphyseal blood vessels, the metaphyseal blood vessels, and then the nutrient blood vessels, which would nourish the diaphysis, the metaphysis, or the spongy bone tissue, basically all throughout here, and the epiphysis respectively. But that was the only reason why we really talked about the metaphysis, is because of the metaphyseal artery and the metaphyseal vein. And something else that I was talking to Kimberly about earlier was that the note that of these, like within these pairs, the artery and the vein, just remember that an artery is carrying nutrients to the site, and the vein is taking wastes away from the site. So arteries are generally depicted as being red, and veins are generally depicted as being blue. So red is basically oxygen rich. So you've got the oxygen and nutrients going to the spongy bone tissue in the case of the epiphyseal artery. And then once all of those nutrients and oxygen are used up by the spongy bone tissue, then the epiphyseal vein is going to take away the waste and the blood to go and get more oxygen and nutrients. So just know artery versus vein. Artery is taking nutrients in, vein is taking wastes out. So arteries are generally red and veins are generally blue. Let's see.
That's awesome.
What about the where we find compact versus bony, spongy bone tissue, bony sponge tissue. Damn it. So you've got compact bone tissue, like making a shell around all of your bones. And then you've got spongy bone tissue inside all of your flat, short, irregular, and sesamoid bones. So they fill, the spongy bone tissue fills all of those types of bones completely. But for long bones, you only have spongy bone tissue at the ends. So at the epiphyses of long bones, you have spongy bone tissue. But in the diaphysis, in the shaft of the long bone, it's just basically a tube of compact bone that's hollow on the inside. And that hollow space is called the medullary cavity, and it is generally filled with yellow bone marrow. Okay, let's see if we can find our bone marrow. I don't know where I talked about bone marrow. Bone marrow.
Ashley, I just had a quick question.
Sure, go for it.
So for the study guide, like the study guide is a really good resource, obviously, like that we can expect all of those things on the test.
Yeah.
Okay, because there's like so many PowerPoints. I'm like, I don't know where to start.
There's a lot. So what I would do is, start with the study guide. If you have a question about a specific thing in the study guide, first of all, identify it now and ask. But second of all, see what chapter it's in, and then go to the PowerPoint, or go to the textbook, or go to Wiley Plus, and like start with the study guide, because that's going to be like how you're going to pinpoint your.
Okay, I was just making sure like everything we need to know was on the study guide.
Yeah. Yep. I'm not asking you to memorize everything that's on the PowerPoints or everything that's on the text. In the text, just what's on the study guide, and you can find all the details on everything in the study guide in the text or in the PowerPoints.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So we've got red bone marrow anywhere where you have spongy bone, right? So that's going to be inside of all of your flat, short, irregular sesamoid bones, and at the epiphyses of long bones, right? And your yellow bone marrow is only going to be found in that medullary cavity in the diaphysis of the long bones. And that's it. Okay. Red bone marrow is where you make red blood cells and other blood cells. And yellow bone marrow is basically fat. So yellow bone marrow is basically for fat storage. And that also counts as a function of your skeletal system, right? So the fact that you have fuel or fat or triglyceride lipid storage in your long bones makes that a function of your skeletal system. You actually do store energy in your bones, as well as storing calcium and making blood cells as per your red bone marrow. Hemopoiesis, your production of blood cells.
Or phosphorus, what is that again? I keep forgetting.
Yeah, phosphorus is just an important mineral required to just store calcium in your bones. I think it's like you use phosphorus in that storage process of laying down bone and therefore mineralizing it with calcium. So the two big minerals that you like really need for building bone is calcium and phosphorus, but I only asked you to know calcium.
Oh, okay, we just put both. Okay, got it. Yeah. But calcium is the one.
Yeah, calcium's the big one. Calcium is the big one. Okay. So on that point, you have an inorganic and an organic component to your bone, right? Mm-hmm. And see if I can find that slide. All this fun stuff.
Yes, right there.
So the inorganic component of bone is minerals, and it's mainly calcium. So calcium is the big one. But the inorganic part of bone is calcium, aka a mineral, and the organic part of bone is the different types of cells that we talked about, right? Mm-hmm. So different bone cells. So you have
when we say like organic or in garlic, I'm hungry. When we say it, that's just the name of it, right? It's nothing.
It's just a descriptor. It's just descriptive.
Okay.
So, yeah, like organic as in living and inorganic as in non-living.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Okay.
Inorganic is just the part that's not alive. So it's just the minerals, just calcium. And then the organic part is the part that's actually living, which is basically just the different types of bone cells. So we had 4 different types of bone cells that we talked about. We talked about stem cells or the osteogenic cells, the osteoblasts, which lay down bone tissue, then the osteoclasts, which take up bone tissue. They are bone resorbing, they reabsorb or resorb bone tissue. And then the osteocyte, which is the mature bone cell that lives in the little lacunae.
Yes.
In the osteon. Where's our little osteon, guys? So inside of each one of these little lacunae, you have your little osteocyte, which is your mature bone cell.
So when it says what blood vessels feed the long bones, so that would be the arteries. No, what did I say? Arteries.
Yep, arteries. Maybe the arteries.
Arteries, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep, those are the ones that are doing the feeding.
The feeding, yes.
Yep, bringing nutrients to it.
Okay.
So other microscopic stuff, maybe just to recap those. You've got your, let's see, I guess this is probably the best one. So you've got your osteons. So each one of these, this one's pulled out, is an osteon, that's an osteon, here's an osteon, et cetera, here's an osteon. They've all got a central canal in the middle where the blood vessels travel through this compact bone, right? So compact bone has like proper osteons with all of their parts, including a central canal. All these blood vessels and nerves, they have to come in through various foramina in the bones, right? So we only talked about certain foramina in certain bones, like the mental foramen of your mandible. You've got one over your eye. Your vertebrae have their spinal and their transverse foramina. You've got your pelvis and your sacrum have various foramina for this purpose, but that's how these blood vessels get into this compact bone, where you do have compact bone, which again is like the shell of all of your bones. And the blood vessels travel up and down the length of the bone, which is also the length of the osteon, right? The osteon's lie parallel to the length of the bone. That's why it's so strong, right? So these central canals run parallel to the length of the bone, carrying blood vessels and nerves, and they they interact with each other through these perforating canals. So the different osteons share blood vessels this way through perforating canals. The perforating canals are also how the blood vessels reach the outside of the bone, like all the way into the spongy center of a bone. And I know that this is showing the spongy center of what it looks like the diaphysis of this bone. And so just remember that even though the diaphysis is hollow and we consider it to be just compact bone, like a compact bone tube in the diaphysis, there is a little bit of spongy bone tissue, so that sort of lines it. Like in this picture, you can kind of see that even though there's less of it, there's still like a little bit of fuzzy, spongy bone tissue just sort of lining the walls of compact bone tissue. Then you still have the yellow bone marrow in the middle. Okay, so don't let that get you down. Don't let that confuse you.
That's not the medullary, right, cavity? That's just like the...
This would be. So this is basically lining the medullary cavity. So this hollow boat-shaped area in the diaphysis of this little long bone is the medullary cavity. But the medullary cavity it's compact bone, right? It's a tube of compact bone surrounding it. But then you do have like a little bit of spongy bone just sort of like lining it.
Okay, got it.
Lining it. Yeah, so that's why you see spongy bone here. And then in the ends of the long bones, of course, it's only spongy bone tissue. And you have a lot less of this compact bone tissue just forming the shell around the outside there. So the compact bone tissue has proper osteons, which each have their own central canal for blood vessels and nerves. In addition to that, each osteon also has these layers, which have been pulled out in this one right here. And each layer is called a lamella. Okay, so those layers, which are kind of like the rings of a tree trunk for each osteon, are collectively known as lamellae. So the plural form of lamella is lamellae. So this is a lamella, this is a lamella, this is a lamella. Together they are the lamellae of this osteon. And in between the lamellae, you've got these little gaps, right? And the little gaps are called lacunae, singular lacuna. So you have one lamella, one lacuna, right? Multiple lamellae, multiple lacunae. And within each lacuna lives a little osteocyte. So that's where your little bone cells actually live. And they can talk to each other by these little, they look like little spider legs. Huh?
Oh, I was just saying canuculi.
Yep, that's it, the canaliculi. Yep.
Canuculi.
Yep, that's how the little osteocytes talk to each other from their lacunae. Exactly. What else of the microscopic stuff? I think that pretty much wraps it up. Here's another view of the periosteum. So you can see.
What is the bone remodeling?
So the bone remodeling is, so we talked about various different types of like bone growth and stuff, right? So
Yeah.
You've got osteogenesis, which is like the first ever bone formation, like when you're a little baby. So it's not bone remodeling, it's making bone for the first time, right? So you've got two different types of that type of first ever making of bone. We talked about intramembranous ossification and endochondral ossification. Intramembranous just means that the bone forms directly from the mesenchyme tissue. Okay, so that was like the mesenchyme is basically like pre-connective tissue. It forms all the other connective tissues, including bones. So intramembranous ossification comes directly from the mesenchyme, and it happens in flat bones and cranial bones. Endochondral ossification happens in all of the other bones, and this is when you make a cartilaginous, as in chondral, as in cartilaginous, like a form or a mold of the bone first. So you basically have like a cartilage version of the bone, and then it gets replaced with bone. So that's the difference between the intramembranous and the endochondral ossification, which are like first time ever making of bone. What you're asking about, the bone remodeling, is down here somewhere.
Ashley, what was the main difference? Just in a gist, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the intramembranous, where did it go? Intramembranous ossification is only happens in flat bones for some reason. They do it this way, and they form bone, like bone cells. Those first osteoprogenitor cells, they form directly in the mesenchyme, which is the like pre-connective tissue cells. So mesenchyme is basically like stem cells for all connective tissue. So when you're still just an embryo, right? An embryo going on fetus, you're going to have that mesenchyme, which is kind of like relatively undifferentiated cells, right? Kind of like stem cells. But stem cells that are differentiated to the point where they know that they're going to be some type of connective tissue, but they don't actually like go from cartilage to bone. Instead, they go straight from mesenchyme to bone. Okay. Endochondral ossification has a leapfrog where they go to cartilage in between. So intramembranous goes straight from mesenchyme to bone, and endochondral goes from mesenchyme to cartilage to bone.
Can you give me an example? So intramembranous is like development, like fetus, and then endochondral is where exactly?
So both of these are happening like in like for the first time. So basically it has to be like in an embryo, right? So if you're making bone for the first time, it means that you're developing as a human for the first time, right? So basically these two types of bone ossification happen in different parts of the same embryo. So you've got this little embryonic baby, right? And in its like shoulder blades and its cranial bones, all of its flat bones, you've got basically just like mesenchymal cells. And then you, some of those cells somewhere in the center of that, a la this picture, So this is all, the blue is all mesenchyme. Somewhere in the middle of that mesenchyme, you're going to have osteoprogenitor cells being like, some of these mesenchyme cells are going to be told like, okay, you're going to be a bone cell. And so they turn into osteoprogenitors, and then eventually they turn into osteoblasts, and then they start making bone. That just happens in the flat bones of the fetus. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the fetus, other bones, aka your long bones and all of your other bones, besides your flat bones, you're basically making a little cartilage mold of those bones. And then you're going to turn that cartilage into bone. So you have intramembranous ossification happening in the flat bones of the fetus or the embryo, and you have endochondral ossification happening in the long bones of the fetus or embryo. They're just happening, there's just two different processes that lead you to the same thing.
Is there a specific reason why that takes place? Like why one has cartilage and one doesn't?
I don't know. I don't think so. Not in particular. Yeah, I honestly have no idea. Just flat bones just do it differently. I don't know why.
That's okay. That definitely helped. I just need to know the difference. So they're both with the fetus. I mean, they both take place in the fetus. It's just different locations is their differences.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Fetus. Yep, no problem.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. I was a little confused on that part too.
It's weird. It's weird. So after you're born, right, postnatal, after you've made your bones for the first time by either intramembranous ossification or endochondral ossification, depending on if it's your flat bones or your long bones, then you're going to have your interstitial growth, which is how your long bones get longer, and you're going to have appositional growth, which is how your bones remodel. Okay, so the remodeling is really just this type of bone growth that happens after you're born and throughout your entire lifetime. Okay, the interstitial bone growth is the bone growth that happens at the epiphyseal plate, right? And it happens from when you're born till you're like in your early 20s, basically, at the latest, right? So that's when you're like getting taller, you're growing length in your long bones. And it happens here at the epiphyseal plate, right? So you're going from, again, cartilage into bone. And so you're growing the length of the long bones from this point right here at the epiphyseal plate. That's how you grow your long bones longer. It's called interstitial bone growth, okay? The appositional growth, which finally is getting to your question of the bone remodeling, is going to be, it is the deposition of bone tissue combined with the resorption of bone tissue, right? So osteoblasts lay down bone tissue and osteoclasts resorb bone tissue, right? So we're clear on that, right? And they're both doing those things. They're both doing their job at the same time. And that's considered bone remodeling. And there's a bunch of factors that affect whether the osteoblasts are doing more than the osteoclasts or vice versa, right? So if you're building more than you're tearing down, or if you're tearing down more than you're building, depends on hormonal factors, which sounds crazy, but it's true. It's actually one of like the biggest factors for how that happens. So you've got growth hormone stimulating interstitial bone growth, not exactly remodeling, but you've got your sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen, which are also contributing to growth spurts. And when you're there's a lot of I'm trying to draw a line here because there are certain like hormonal stuff that we didn't actually talk about, like calcitonin stuff we didn't talk about. So sorry, let me just arrange my thoughts here real quick. What we talked about in terms of
Professor, bone remodeling in general, so basically it's just that process of the osteoclasts and osteoblasts. It's just the homeostasis that they basically keep going, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
The remodeling includes both tearing down and building up, and it just depends on a bunch of different things, whether or not you're doing one more than the other at any given time. So hormones, generally speaking, they play a big role in that. The only hormone I think we actually talked about in terms of bone remodeling, though, is estrogen. When women in particular become menopausal and you have less estrogen in your system, you end up having your osteoclasts doing more than your osteoblasts, which means that you're tearing down more bone than you are building up, which leads to osteoporosis, right? So that's why women are at a greater risk, older women are at a greater risk of osteoporosis than anybody else. And then the other reason why, or the other factor that affects bone remodeling is that Wolff's Law, right? So Wolff's Law says that if you pull on a bone, if you apply mechanical stress to a particular area of a bone, that's going to activate the osteoblasts in that area of the bone to add more bony tissue to make that bone thicker and stronger, right? Of course, you can affect it with your diet and stuff. So like if you have too much calcium in your bloodstream, so that calcium homeostasis in your blood, if that goes out of balance, you're going to take calcium out of your bloodstream and put it into your bones. So that's also going to activate your osteoblasts, right? So you're going to be wanting to lay down bone tissue to store that calcium. And then vice versa, if you don't have enough calcium, your osteoclasts are going to get to work pulling calcium out of your bones to rebalance that homeostasis. Here's phosphorus, right? So here's where phosphorus lies in here. But again, not asking you to memorize any of these other minerals besides calcium. You do need certain vitamins in order to absorb calcium. So like vitamin D in particular is important for absorbing calcium. So these are just kind of peripheral stuff. The calcium is the important part that I want you to remember. Of course, when you injure your bones, you're going to be doing bone remodeling, right? So if you have a bone fracture of some sort or some other injury, then you're going to want to rebuild that bone. So if you're laying down bone, it's still considered bone remodeling. Okay. So bone remodeling happens throughout your entire life.
So is it safe to say that the factors that affect bone remodeling are like fractures or growth? Like what exactly?
I would say hormones, mechanical stress, and then those are the big ones. But I guess you could call it lifestyle choices. So like getting enough calcium or like calcium homeostasis, right? So if you have too much calcium, you're going to do bone remodeling by putting more calcium down, putting more bone tissue down. And if you have not enough calcium, then you're going to do bone remodeling by tearing bone tissue up to get that calcium. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Cool. No problem. Blood control is hormonal, mechanical, and I guess we're considering calcium as being part of like the hormonal control, but that's fine. We can keep it separate. Yeah. So all of these hormones that are mentioned here, we didn't talk about. So you're not going to be asked about those. Just that basically the amount of calcium in your blood is going to affect whether or not you end up with osteoclasts working harder or osteoblasts working harder, if that makes sense. If you have not enough, then you're going to stimulate your osteoclasts to pull calcium out of your bone to put into your blood. And if you have too much, then you are going to activate your osteoblasts to deposit calcium salts into your bone to bring that blood calcium level down. Okay? What else? Wolff's Law, we just talked about. bone remodeling in response to forces or mechanical stress. And then bone fractures, of course. Oh yeah, that's the other one that you said, right? Hormones, mechanical stress. But yeah, fractures, bone injury is going to affect that too. There isn't like an official list, just know when bone remodeling is going to actually happen, which is going to be.
So, Ashley, I'm sorry. What steps do we need to know specifically for the interstitial and appositional bone growth? Yeah, where's that at on the slide? So, like, I'm looking at the postnatal bone growth.
Right.
The interstitial growth. Obviously, it's length versus thickness. Now, what are the steps that you're recommending us that we know, like the in-depth part?
Basically, this. So the interstitial growth is the growth in the length of the long bones. These are the different, basically those are different regions within this epiphyseal plate right here. So you've got the epiphyseal plate at the ends of your long bones, right? This is just long bones. And you've got growth happening here when you're like a kid and a teenager, right? And if you zoom in on this little plate of cartilage, this little epiphyseal plate, you're going to have cartilage cells in the middle, which are rapidly turning into calcified bone cells, right? Into ossified bone through several steps. And the several steps, I just want you to be able to put them in order, basically, which is that you've got your resting zone where it's just cartilage cells sitting there. The proliferation zone is when the cartilage cells are proliferating. They're undergoing mitosis. The hypertrophic zone is where the cartilage cells are getting fat. They're enlarging. Hypertrophic is in like lots of eating. So they're basically consuming a lot and they're getting big and fat. And then the calcification zone, when the external matrix outside of those cells starts to see calcium being deposited there. So you've got the matrix becoming calcified, the cartilage cells are dying, and they basically turn into bone. So that calcium basically, like, the extracellular matrix basically takes up all of the space where those cells were. So all those cells are dead and they get taken over by the that bony matrix, which is calcium. Does that make sense? So basically just be able to put those in order because the names really say what's happening. The resting zone, proliferation zone, hypertrophic, calcification, then ossification. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. What else? Different breaks, different break types. The green stick fracture, right? Only a little partial fracture. These steps to healing a fracture is the same type of thing. Just know the order that they happen in. You don't have to know like all the nitty gritty details. When a bone break happens, first you have a hematoma, which is a blood clot forming. Then you have a cartilaginous callus forming, okay? So basically the cartilage is going to be taking up where that hematoma was. And then that is going to be taken up by bone instead. So you're going from a hematoma, a blood clot, being replaced by cartilage, which is then replaced by bone. And then finally you have some bone remodeling, which is just like taking away and putting bone in places to make it look as close to the original bone as possible. So you're just kind of making it pretty in the last step of the repair process for bone fractures. Okay, so just know like the order of these steps, okay? Hematoma, cartilaginous or fibrocartilaginous callus, bony callus, and then some bone remodeling to pretty it up. Okay. We talked about 4 different diseases of the bone, osteomalacia, where you have very porous bones due to a vitamin D or calcium deficiency. Rickets is the same thing, except it's specific to children who are still growing. So when they have this deficiency and they're still trying to grow, then they end up having like bone deformities. Their bones end up being deformed because they can't grow properly without the vitamin D and calcium. Osteoporosis, of course, is the sort of the wear and tear of bone tissue that happens to everybody as they age. And you can kind of like, you can keep it at bay for longer by, if you're menopausal, taking an estrogen replacement, supplementing with calcium and vitamin D, keep moving, right? So do some weight-bearing exercises, and generally keep good health. But you've also got some drugs that you can use for that as well. But generally speaking, take your calcium, take your vitamin D, and do your weight-bearing exercises. And the last one was Paget's disease, which is when you have bony matrix being deposited sort of haphazardly, or you have excessive breakdown that is localized in a particular bone group or a bone by itself. So you have like Paget's disease of the pelvis, or Paget's disease like of a particular bone in particular. So you end up having mostly spongy bone and not a lot of compact bone, and not very much mineralization. So you basically end up with soft bones. And it possibly has a viral origin, but we don't know for sure. And we didn't talk in too much detail about the developmental aspects. I think I just said that this is more for interest's sake. I don't think I actually am asking you to know these things, just out of curiosity. But if you're looking at this embryo, you can see that a lot of this stuff is ossified, but some things are clearly not ossified completely yet, like the sternum, interestingly.
Actually, I have another question. I'm sorry.
No, go for it. I'm just filling space.
Going into chapter 7, what is the difference between a foramen versus I think it's called a meatus? Because they're both openings. One's for blood vessels, nerves, and ligaments. I've been able to recognize those throughout the school, but what's the difference between that and a meatus?
Okay, so a foramen, some examples that we have here, the little supraorbital foramen, the mental foramen here, these are little guys. Of course, the foramen magnum is much, much larger, but the thing that they all have in common is that they are passing through a relatively thin bone, and they don't extend past the boundaries of the bone itself. So like the occipital bone is a flat bone, right? So the hole here, the foramen magnum, is just a hole, okay, in that bone. In contrast, something like the external auditory meatus is actually a tube. So even though it's just passing through the flat bone of the temporal bone, there is actually like a whole tube, a bony tube from either end of it. So from the outside to the inside, it's a tube. And this is the only example that you have of bone markings of a meatus, is the external auditory meatus. And the external auditory meatus is where your ear canal lives. Let's see if I can pull this up.
So the difference is like basically what you said. It actually has a bone cylinder.
Is a tube, yeah, and a foramen is a hole.
Okay, thank you.
Just a hole. Let's see. Out of curiosity, see if I can get a good image of the meatus, even though it probably won't be named as such. Hey, come back here. So the external auditory meatus. Let me move this stuff around. My face is in the way. So this is the temporal bone all through here, and the external auditory meatus is going to be like this whole tube through here, right? Through, this is going to be the internal, that internal side from the inside of the skull, right here and here. That's actually going to be this guy right here. When we talk about the ear, we get to talk about all these cool structures, including this, which is actually a separate tube that goes to your throat. So when you get your ears all plugged up, when you're coming down in an airplane or something, you need to pop your ears. What you're doing is you're basically relieving the pressure from here through into your nasal or into your throat, which is like partially your nasal passage.
So that yellow tube is the meatus. Is that what you said?
This is a nerve that's passing through the meatus, the other end of the meatus right here. So the tube goes from the meatus itself, the bone, the tube of bone goes basically from here all the way to here. And all these little guys live in between there and there. So it's kind of bizarre. You do have like a hollow space here for your little ossicles to move around. And then you've got all of this fun structure that we're going to learn all about, your inner ear right here and where it lives. And that is directly, believe it or not, this picture is a little bit misleading. It all leads directly into your brain from outside to inside. So that's the tube. That's what's in the tube. You know, this picture makes it a little bit weirder, I guess. Not as helpful as I thought it would be. From here to out here. This kind of shows it a little bit better, how you've got open spaces in here for all this stuff. Anyway, I think I answered the question.
So may I ask a question about chapter 9?
Absolutely.
What's the difference between circumduction and rotation movement?
Excellent question. For this one, I think it'd be easier if I got up. So let me get make my screen bigger so I can see. You guys are gonna get to see my Hobbit pants. I'm wearing my Hobbit pants today. I found these. My mom brought over a dresser of old clothes. I was like, oh yeah, my Hobbit pants. These were cool at some point, I think. They're comfortable. What else matters? Okay, so circumduction is when you take your limb, your arm, for example. You can also do it with your leg, but your arm, for example, and you make a cone in space. So this is circumduction. Okay, this is also circumduction. This is, you can't really see, but if you're drawing a circle on the floor, that's circumduction, doing that. Okay, so you're basically moving the arm around the through its entirety of movement in terms of the ball and socket joint. So you're basically like doing the movement allowed by the ball and socket joint, like this. Rotation, on the other hand, is when you take your limb, such as your arm, and you do this. With your arm specifically, when you're doing that, you are also doing supination and pronation of the hand. You're also doing supination and pronation, but if you're going all the way with your humerus, that is rotation. So when you do it with your leg, rotation would be going like this or like this, right? So this is rotation, and that is happening like at the femur, on the femur level, going around like this, versus going all the way around like this. This is circumduction, and then this is rotation. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. Now, kind of weird differences there. Okay, I can make my face smaller now. I'm done looking at it. How about, so if we're going into chapter 7, talking about our cranial and facial bones, maybe. Let's see. Oh, the study guide yeah, the study guide covers the same exams. Or sorry. So the study guide covers both exams because I've been lecturing all of the same material in my lectures. So both lecture and lab material are being combined in the lectures, as in the videos that we've been making. So I made one study guide with all of that information. And the difference between your exams is really like the lecture exam is going to be true and false, or multiple choice, or select multiple answers type questions. And the lab exam is going to be, here's a picture, name the thing that the arrow is pointing to, or name the thing that the picture is of. That's really the big difference. It's just like different question types. Cranial versus facial bones. Cranial bones are the ones that are associated with the cranial cavity. So the ones that touch your brain, which includes the weird butterfly-shaped sphenoid bone and the funky little brain-shaped ethmoid bone, as well as all of your, the cranial bones that correspond with the lobes of your brain, right? So your frontal bone, your temporal bone, your occipital bone, and your parietal bones are all of your cranial bones, and your facial bones are everybody else that is not actually like associated with the cranial cavity, right? So that's going to be your maxilla and mandible, your zygomatic bone, your bone, all the bones of your like nasal cavity. So you've got your paired nasal bones, your vomer, your nasal conchae, and then also your lacrimal bones in here. So funny little green pair of bones there. The nasal bones are paired. The vomer is not paired, it's a singular bone, and your nasal conchae are paired. This here, which looks like it's continuous with the vomer, and it may look that way actually in an actual normal human skull, and it does, so check that out. So you can kind of see the differentiation. So your vomer is here. Can anybody name what the hell this is that it's attached to?
The middle concha or concha?
The middle concha of the
ethmoid
bone. So your ethmoid bone is this green bone back here. And let's see, can you see it from here? Yeah, you can. They have it, it looks really weird here, but that's your ethmoid bone. Also in orange here.
The butterfly one, right?
The ethmoid is the one shaped like a little brain.
The one on top of it?
It's actually just inferior to the sphenoid. The butterfly, the sphenoid is the butterfly bone. Okay. What was let's see. I keep forgetting to just freaking like put a bookmark on it. Oh, there it is, this one. This is the cool thing. No, it's not the cool thing. Where's the cool thing? Uh-oh. Nope. Interactive exploding skull. Hello. Okay. This is the cool thing. I also have this linked in our bones discussion on Canvas. So it's gonna be a thing. Jesus. So the sphenoid and the ethmoid bone, you look at it from this superior angle. Here's the sphenoid bone, the butterfly-shaped bone, okay? You can see it from both the inside and the outside of the skull, right? That's the sphenoid, okay? This butterfly-shaped bone right here. The ethmoid bone is just anterior to that. It's this funky thing right here. Weird looking, sort of brain-shaped bone right here. Does that clarify it or make it worse? Be honest.
What was the question again?
Just that I just wanted to show you how the ethmoid bone, and it's not even that helpful. Let's see. Like, I wish I could take this skull apart on the essential skull, because you can see, hello, the sphenoid bone from the outside right here.
Mm-hmm.
See it on the inside a little bit up here, but the ethmoid bone, you can only see, like, I think you can see a little bit of it here. That's the lacrimal bone right there.
I think you have it in one of your slides.
Do I? And
That
then
shows it a little bit better.
the rest of it right here. So let's see if we can, I was like kind of looking for, is there a place, if you pull
Right
the
there.
bone
I think-
out, yeah, it looks like this. So this is that long middle concha.
But if you go to slide 14, I think it's that one.
Yeah, and then you can see it from the inside of the brain case, sitting there right just anterior to the sphenoid bone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wish that there was like, I want to just have the ethmoid bone like separated out. Like, I wish I could, like, can I? Oh my God, dude, I just figured it out. Hello, this is what I want. Awesome. So this is that middle concha. And then this is that, the plate, whatever the hell plate that's supposed to be. The cribriform plate, right up at the top there. It's right here. So, really weird looking bone. That's really cool that I can do that though. I'm really happy about that. So does it mean I can do that with the sphenoid too? Awesome. Check that out. Essential skeleton, man. Even cooler than I thought it was. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So remember the sella turcica right here. This little guy right here. Just to orient you a little bit. The greater wings here, and the, I suppose that's supposed to be the lesser wings here and here. There and there. Greater wings, lesser wings.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. What else? Any markings seem really weird. The hyoid bone, I know it has it as like a random bone at the end of chapter 16 or lab 16 in your lab manual, but I want you to note that the hyoid bone is considered part of the axial skeleton, okay?
Okay.
So it's in the axial skeleton chapter of your book. It's in the axial skeleton portion of your PowerPoint for chapter 7, which is the axial skeleton. But we do touch on it in that lab 16, and so I put it into one of the other PowerPoints. We touched on it, but it's technically part of the axial skeleton. Different types of vertebrae, right? 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, are different curvatures of the spine, cervical, cervical and lumbar, thoracic and sacral, each going in their own direction, right? Convex, or I guess depending on which way you're looking, right? Damn it. Concave, convex. If you were looking at somebody from a posterior angle, right? Looking at them from behind, this would be an anterior angle. Our little abnormal spine curvatures, right? So scoliosis would be if you had curving like from here to here, side to side. Okay, so side to side or lateral curvatures of the spine are considered scoliosis. Kyphosis would be an exaggerated thoracic curvature of the spine, which would kind of lead to a hunchback appearance, right? You like really exaggerate this right here. And lordosis or swayback is when you exaggerate this curve. So you basically, happens to pregnant women a lot because of that lower back pain. So you just kind of like sticking your butt out and your lower back sort of curves in too far. And that's called lordosis. The different vertebra types. Check out a cervical vertebra, tiny little body. It's the only one that has these transverse foramina, right? So here's one little transverse foramen. One transverse foramen, another transverse foramen. It of course has a spinous process, as do thoracic and lumbar vertebrae, but it doesn't have transverse processes like lumbar and thoracic vertebrae have. But so what it has in common with all the other types of vertebrae, what all three types of vertebrae have in common, no matter what, I shouldn't say no matter what. I should never use those three words in this class ever. They just don't exist. No matter what, it's just don't even say it. It's not a thing.
I'll be like Ashley said.
I know.
Or what? No, just kidding.
Generally speaking, they all have a body, a vertebral foramen, and a spinous process, right? So what they have different, the cervical vertebrae have a transverse foramen, your thoracic vertebrae have transverse processes. Your thoracic and your lumbar, the big difference between them is that the lumbar has a huge vertebral body compared to the thoracic. Not so much of a vertebral body. The thoracic is going to have larger transverse processes because that's where they articulate with the ribs of your thoracic cage, right? This being thoracic vertebrae. What else? Your atlas and your axis, C1 and C2 vertebrae, are special, right? They have a very unique structure about them. And when I said about all of your vertebrae having a vertebral body, these are the exception to that rule that I thought of as I was saying it. So as you can see, your axis does not really have a vertebral body. So if we were to go and find our axis bone and isolate it, there is not really a vertebral body to speak of there, right? It does have our little transverse foramina. It has the spinous or spinal foramen, but no vertebral body and no spinous process really on that one. The atlas, which is your C2 vertebra, has a very special structure in lieu of a vertebral body, right? This here is called the dens, right? So the dens fits up through the atlas so that you get that pivot joint, right? So the atlas fits over the axis, and then you guys end up being able to like pivot around that this way. You're pivoting around the dens of the axis, but it does have a little transverse foramina and that little spinal foramen as well. Kind of a little bit of a spinous process here. Okay. Atlas, axis. Pretty cool. I also like how the hyoid, whoa, oh God, I lost it. How you can highlight the hyoid bone and see it floating there. That's pretty cool. Not attached to any other bone.
But it's part of the
It's considered part of the axial skeleton.
axial. Okay.
The axial skeleton. Oh, kind of weird. I love this guy. Makes me happy. All right. What else, you guys? Types of vertebrae, types of ribs.
Let's talk about chapter 8.
Move on to chapter 8. Let's move on to chapter 8.
It's okay. Just teach everything all over again.
Okay.
Right?
Don't
We're
mind,
all for it.
don't mind if I do. See if I can crash my computer. Should probably close some of these other ones, but let's just push it to the limit.
Go for it.
Okay, we're not going with them. I'm just gonna like look through here a little bit. Okay, so that was your axial skeleton, right? Your appendicular skeleton includes your pectoral and pelvic girdles, right?
Mhm.
Your I wanted to spin that. You just see me trying. Oh, how's that? Okay. Your pectoral girdle has 2 bones. Okay. Your scapula and your clavicle. Those are your pectoral girdle. Your pelvic girdle is, of course, your coxal bones of your pelvis, right? And they have them separated out here. So it is 3 fused bones, right? Your ilium, your ischium, and your pubis, right? Or pubic bone. But combined, all 3 of those on each half of your pelvis is called the coxal bone, or os coxa, right? It is attached to your axial skeleton via your sacrum posteriorly, and on the anterior side, your 2 coxal bones attached to each other via this pubic symphysis, right? And the symphysis is a type of cartilaginous joint, right? So there is a little bit of fibrocartilage that sits right there in between the 2 coxal bones. And it's considered a cartilaginous joint. Specifically, it is the pubic symphysis. All right. So those are your girdles. 2 bones for pectoral. Technically 6 bones, I guess, for your pelvic, but there are 3 fused bones for each coxal bone, each side of your pelvis. Okay. Your clavicle and your scapula have some markings. The only ones I wanted you to know for your clavicle are the acromial end and the sternal end. The acromial end interacts with the acromion process of your scapula, and the sternal end is always medial, right? Because it's interacting with the sternal notches of your manubrium, which is that top part of your sternum. Okay, so here's your manubrium. Here's your clavicular notches. Let's see if I can tilt a little bit here. So see how they're interacting with the clavicular notches at the sternal end. And then a little bit. The acromion or the acromion process or the acromial process, I'll accept any of those, of the scapula, which is also associated with the spine of the scapula, remember, is where the other end of the clavicle interacts with the scapula, okay? So the sternal or medial end and the acromion or lateral end of your clavicle bone, okay? Your scapulae, which you will want to be able to orient in space by itself, right? So if you're looking at this guy, you know you're looking at it from a posterior view, right? You know that where the glenoid cavity is, right, that socket, that's going to be the lateral side, right? Because that's going to be farther away from the midline. The medial side is going to be the long flat edge that's going to be up against or next to your vertebral column, right? So if you take your scapula and you isolate it, then you're going to want to take a look at where the glenoid cavity is and say, okay, that's where the arm sticks on, right? So if that's where the arm goes, then this is where the vertebral column is, right? And since your scapulae are sort of like curved in towards your back like this, right? Or also consider that this spine is not digging into your thoracic cage, right? The spine you can feel from the outside. It's always on the posterior side of your scapula, okay? So you have your subscapular fossa down here. And then over here you have the supraspinous, as in above the spine fossa, and your infraspinous or below spine fossa on the posterior side, okay? So this is the anterior side, this is the posterior side because it's got this spine here. This is the lateral side because you've got the socket to your shoulder joint over here, which makes this the medial side over here, okay? So the vertebral border is that medial border because it's close to your vertebrae, right? Medial vertebral border right there. This over here, the axillary border on this one and over here on this one. Yeah. What is happening here? Who are you? Daddy. Fossa, glenoid. Was I just saying that that might also be a way to describe it? Okay. Fine. Okay, so you've got your vertebral border, which is your medial border, and your axillary border, which is your lateral border. Okay. Who else? The upper limb, moving on down. Shoulder bone's connected to the arm bone. The humerus has a head and an anatomical neck as well as a surgical neck. And in between those two necks, you have the greater and lesser tubercles. Okay, greater and lesser tubercles. Down the shaft or diaphysis, you've got the deltoid tuberosity and the radial groove. Let's see if we can see those. Not terribly clear on this. I would expect the deltoid tuberosity to be, like here-ish. So it should be on the lateral side of the bone. It's not terribly clear from any angle. So maybe this person just like has really, really weak shoulder muscles. Didn't grow a big deltoid tuberosity there. All the way down at the distal end, you've got your, you have your condyles, but they have special names for the bones that they interact with. The trochlea is the one that interacts with the trochlear notch of the ulna, right? So the bottle cap view of the ulna is the trochlear notch, and it wraps around the trochlea of the humerus. And the capitulum is the part of, it's really the condyle or the part of the humerus that interacts with the head of the radius, okay? When the arm is flexed like this, that head of the radius has to fit into a spot, and it fits into the radial fossa right here. So that little gap right there. And of course, same thing, the ulna needs to fit into some place on the humerus as well so that you can do this. And that little place is called the coronoid fossa. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Oops. This is my only complaint. Too much control and yet not enough. I have to keep starting over. Okay. So we can see on this extended arm, the radius and the ulna. The radius, if you were to flex this arm all the way up like this, that head of that radius would fit into this little radial notch right there. And as you can see, the trochlea of the humerus is being wrapped up by the U-shaped trochlear notch of the ulna, right? It's wrapping all the way around that trochlea. So when you flex the arm all the way up like this little part of the ulna is going to fit snugly right into this little coronoid process. Right there, okay? The radius and ulna are so fun, so much fun. All right, radius is rad, it's always associated with your thumb, and the ulna is always associated with your pinky. When you're in anatomical position, like this guy is, then the radius will be lateral and the ulna will be medial, right? But if you were to pronate your hand, the opposite will be true, right? The radius will be medial and the ulna will become lateral. So always make sure you're talking about anatomical position if you're going to be using those directional terms regarding the radius and the ulna specifically. What else we got for radius and ulna? We've got the radial notch.
Professor, are you answering somebody's question right now? I'm sorry.
I am totally spitballing.
Okay. I'm like, awesome. Okay, I have questions for you.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, let me go back to my study guide really quick. Shoot, where did it go? Okay. It on the study guide in chapter 7, it said know the 6 fontanelles. I'm only finding 4. Is that correct? It's the anterior, posterior, the mastoid, and the sphenoid, right?
2 of them are paired. So,
Okay.
yeah, so you're right, but 2 of them are paired. The sphenoidal are paired. They're here. 1, and the mastoid, 1, 2. So that's 2, 4, 5, and 6. Frontal or anterior and posterior. 2 sphenoidal and 2 mastoidal. It equals 6 total. So you could say there's 4 types, but there are 6 fontanelles.
Got it, because they're paired. There's 1 on each side for the mastoid, and what was the other one? The mastoid and the fontanelle?
The sphenoid or
Sphenoid.
sphenoidal. Yeah.
Sphenoid and mastoid. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. What else? What else?
Can I write that down really quick? I know I have another question for you. I'm sorry.
Oh, take your time. Take your time.
Okay, thank you.
I found this new image of the wrist bones, the carpal bones for you guys, hoping that it would be a little bit more useful than that piece of crap thing that I had the last time. Here it is. Is this the piece of crap thing? No, this one's better, actually, I think, than that terrible thing that I had before. This one is a right hand.
Okay, going back to the paranasal sinuses, what is their function? I know it's the frontal, ethmoid, sphenoid, and maxillary, but we didn't go into too much detail of what their functions were. It was kind of just a general function of what the sinuses are.
Yeah.
What do you want us to know specifically?
I think we just wanted to name, why do I have two of them? Or do I have two of them?
This is chapter 7, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I wanted you to be able to name them and know their their combined function. So basically, where the heck did I put them? I know they're here. There they are. Okay, so basically, there are 4 pairs. There's 4 pairs of them. They're located like inside of the actual bone. So like not like within the cranial cavity, but like inside of your maxillary bone, inside of your sphenoid bone, inside of your ethmoid bone, and inside of your frontal bone, like in the wall of the frontal bone. So those are the 4 different pairs: frontal, ethmoidal, sphenoid, and maxillary. And generally speaking, they make the skull lighter, and they may enhance the resonance of your voice. That's really, I mean, they're hollow, air-filled spaces. So basically, what it has here is that's really it. That's really all you need to know about it.
Okay, is that really their only function?
I'm sure that there's a lot more to it than that. That's just what we understand. That's as much as we understand at this time.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure that slide that you're on right now was all we needed to know about them. It lightens the skull, and you said it enhances our voice.
This, I feel like, is still like kind of hypothetical, but I don't know. I don't know. It's a possible function. I'm not gonna like make you name the functions or anything like that.
Okay.
This is not critical. Don't worry too much about it.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Actually, I have a question. Same thing for chapter 7. What do you mean by what are its markings for the hyoid bone?
Yeah, the only markings they were in that lab 16 when it had it as a random extra bone. At the end here, it was like the greater horns. The greater horns and the lesser horns and the body. So literally it's like greater horn, lesser horn, and the body.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yep, that's literally it. They're called something weird in the lab. The greater and lesser cornu is what they're called, but I'll accept horns. That's fine.
All right.
Another view of it, since I'm having so much fun with essential skeleton for greater horn, lesser horn, and the body of the hyoid.
And when you say what is the hyoid bone, is there anything specific you want us to know? Because I know you said it doesn't serve a purpose, it's just they're floating.
It's floating there. I think it's like a residual leftover thing from the formation of jaws from like pre-jaw animals with gills. So I think it's actually like a leftover from having gills, but I'm not sure, and I'm not like asking you to know that.
Okay.
What the purpose of the hyoid bone is, don't worry about it. It does connect via ligaments to the styloid process up there. I didn't mention that, and I'm not requiring you to ask or to know that. One thing that I saw or that I mentioned that I think is interesting, is that in the murder cases, when they find the hyoid bone broken on a murder victim, that's how they know that they've been strangled. Right? So this bone is delicate enough that through strangulation, it usually gets broken. It usually gets busted. So they checked that. I thought that was kind of...
And that's the hyoid bone, correct?
Indeed. Yep. Sure is. Such a weird thing. I didn't end up telling you guys whether I ended up not wanting you guys to memorize the like the names of the facets on the vertebrae. So don't worry about them, but they're just where the ribs interact with the thoracic vertebrae specifically. But you don't have to know the names of them. Infants have more bones than adults because they have more skull bones than we do. And I think it might take longer for certain bones to ossify after you're born. So you end up having, you have like a paired, like your frontal bone is paired when you're first born, and then they fuse to form one bone. So technically you have more bones when you're first born. Remember when you guys first looked at the cranial and facial bones and you're like, oh my God, this is crazy.
It's still crazy. I'm just kidding. Not as much though.
So, yeah, it's like, no, it's not quite as crazy as like the joints or something. The joints are kind of gnarly. Want to go over the joints by any chance? Feel okay about those?
I actually like, I'm very like hesitant with those.
Yeah.
Use some stuff with those.
Versus structural classifications. I wonder, maybe we should just like see if we can make a chart for funsies. So you've got, let's see, your structural classification and your functional classification. Of the structural classifications, you've got fibrous joints, cartilaginous joints, and synovial joints, right? And the functional classifications are synarthroses, amphiarthroses, and diarthroses. Okay, so synarthroses are no movement, some movement. Diarthroses are fully movable. Okay, so we can start with that. I have to put an underline under these or I'm gonna go crazy. Okay. All right. Of the fibrous joints, let's make these bigger. And then we can do a little tab for examples. Fibrous joints, right? Let me get my list up here so I don't mess this up. Okay. We have sutures of the skull, right? We have syndesmoses. These guys are those those little membranes in between paired bones of the lower arm and the lower leg. Okay, so is this helping? Am I wasting my time here? Is this okay?
No, definitely. It breaks it down because
I'm going to call them, oh yeah, it's interosseous membrane. I hope it's okay if I break that down a little bit. Interosseous membranes. And gomphases, which are your tooth sockets, right? Okay.
yeah.
Sutures. Actually, let's do this. So your synarthroses are not movable. Your amphiarthroses are semi-movable, and your diarthroses are fully movable, right? The sutures of your skull are synarthrotic. The syndesmoses, those interosseous membranes, are amphiarthrotic. Let me confirm that again. I know we had this problem, didn't we? Slight movement. Yep. And your gomphases with your teeth are ideally synarthrotic, right? Okay. Your cartilaginous joints are going to be your make sure I got this right. Okay. Your synchondrices are your places where you have hyaline cartilage. Your symphyses are where you have hyaline and fibro cartilage. I can make this bigger now. And these guys, to take it down even further, are going to be including your physial plates. And I believe you're the costal cartilage of your the physial plate. I believe that's the only example in your text. I think in our PowerPoint, though, we have, yeah, that's right. This costal cartilage. Okay. Epiphyseal plate and the costal cartilage of your ribs. Your symphyses include your intervertebral discs and your pubic symphysis, right? As a symphysis, it is one of these symphyses. Okay. These guys are going to be synarthrotic. Boom. And your symphyses are semi-mobile. Okay?
Ashley, are we able to interrupt you while you're making this? Just to ask a quick question. Going back to chapter 7, for the 3 types of vertebrae, obviously it's the cervical, thoracic, and lumbar. And you're asking how many of each is found in, obviously in each column. Are you going to ask us like the same thing for the sacrum and the coccyx?
The sacrum and the coccyx, since they are fused, I would know that the sacrum is 5 fused vertebrae and the coccyx is 4, I believe.
Okay, just because on the study guide I wasn't sure because you only asked for the 3 types of vertebrae, which are obviously the basic, and then the last 2 weren't mentioned, so I wasn't.
So the sacrum and the coccyx, don't worry about what kind of vertebrae they are that are fused. The sacrum and the coccyx, I don't even know if they're technically vertebrae. I've always taught it, and they've always been taught to me as like separate bones of the axial skeleton. So like they are the point where the vertebral column terminates, but they're not vertebrae per se. Consider them separate bones, the sacrum and the coccyx.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem. And then synovial joints is where it gets, where you thought you were okay, and then you get to synovial joints and you realize that there's a ton of synovial joint crap that you need to know, right? So first off, with synovial joints, you need to know that there are the 6 different parts that all synovial joints have, right? So they all have a synovial cavity in between the 2 bones, right? And the ends of those bones each have articular cartilage. That's 2 things. Inside of that synovial cavity or joint cavity, there is synovial fluid. The synovial capsule encloses all of the above. And what was the last thing? Was it blood supply?
Ashley, I know I might lose your train of thought, but for the differences between the female and the male pelvis, is there a specific number of differences you want us to know? Because I know the textbook has a decent amount, and then you showed us a certain amount.
Yeah, I only showed you certain particular ones. The most important ones are going to be the, actually, let me just see what the book has here. I would say, so on page 272 of your textbook, you've got that table 8.1, which is actually pretty nifty. Yes, yes. See if I can pull up table 8.1. There it is. Okay. So what I want you guys to, or what you might want to focus on really is going to be, it's going to be this image right here. So like the size of the opening, which is the true pelvis, is going to be larger and farther across, so wider in the female pelvis, right? This one is much smaller and narrower in the male pelvis. The hip bones are wider than in the male pelvis. This angle between the 2 obturator foramina is called the pubic arch right here, but this angle basically is larger and it's smaller here in the male pelvis. So those differences are really the critical ones. You might also want to note that from a lateral perspective, this isn't even a very good picture of this, but let's see if I've got a better one. Axial, nope, appendicular. This picture right here. Check out how the coccyx and the sacrum are totally like practically blocking off the birth canal, or the analogous birth canal in the male pelvis, right? Versus the female pelvis, where it's all bent out of the way. The sacrum and the coccyx are like pushed posteriorly and out of the way, and this one is curved anteriorly in the male pelvis. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So, shorter and wider, and the sacrum and coccyx are out of the way.
Because I know that was a question on the quiz. Like, it was like, oh, if an investigator found a dead body, and I was like,
okay.
okay, but and I had to look at the images, and then it was kind of a little confusing for me.
Did you end up getting it right?
Yeah, but I think I missed one, so that gave me like a 0.67 out of like total point.
I know, that's so, the thing is so weird. Give me a chance to look at it, and I'll give you extra points for that. Because it's just bizarre. Okay. So our types of synovial joints that we have here. Okay. We had the different types of joints and then the types of movements that they are capable of. Right? So we had plain joints. How far into this do we want to go at the same time? Let's see. Let's just start with this. Plain joints, hinge joints, pivot joints, condyloid joints, saddle joints, and ball end socket joints. I think they're going to need to be smaller. Okay. And all of these are, of course, fully movable, okay? So in terms of the structural versus functional classifications, maybe this would be helpful. Let me save this just because why not? Let's do something similar, except for just the synovial joints. And this will be in terms of the types of movements of synovial joints. Let's see if this works. I'm just making this up as I go along. I have no idea. So we know first that they are all diarthroses, right? This is important. What we want to add to this is the type of movement. Types of synovial joints. I want to make sure that I'm using the right summary of movements. Blah, 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 blah. As in like the axial movement types. As in, I'll just call it axial movement then, because I don't see any other terminology floating around in the text. So there are non-axial movements. There are, black please. Black please, good God. Why is it green? Whatever. Uniaxial, biaxial, and multi-axial. Did I miss any? I don't think so. Love of God. And if we were to color code Let's color code these for funsies. And then we can also have examples too. So let's do it. Oh, that's terrible. Can't tell the difference between that at all. Okay. I just know that I want multi-axial to be purple for some reason. That's all I know. Okay. So let's get some examples in here. Actually, yeah, that's fine. So plane joints, right? These guys are going to be your carpal, your intercarpal, yeah, let's call that intercarpal, intertarsal joints. We've got our hinge joints, which is going to be our elbow and knee. Our pivot joints, which are going to be our, well, let's see, trying to remember what it's called. The axio-atlantic, atlantoaxial, nope, I was way off. Atlantoaxial joint, right? Because that axis sits on top of the atlas, which has the dens, and it rotates like this, right? So that's a pivot joint. It's pivoting. This is what's happening when you do a pivot joint with your atlantoaxial joint. And your radio-ulnar joint, right? So the radius is in that nifty little, it's got a little ligament that wraps around the radius from the ulna. And for you to supinate and pronate your hand is only possible because the radius is pivoting like here, as it sits next to the ulna. Okay, so the ulna is kind of staying put a little bit, and the radius is rotating. So it's pivoting as the ulna moves around it. Okay, so the atlantoaxial and is it going to be the radio-ulnar? I don't want you to have to know, I'm not asking you to memorize what these joints are called, okay? If I ask you what type of joint something is, then I will describe it in terms of the bones involved and not its name, even though most of the time the name implies the joints or the bones that are involved in the joint. In the case of some of them are a little bit weird. I would never like give you a term that you haven't heard before. Your condyloid, which are basically an oval shape. It's like an oval shaped or a very shallow ball and socket that only can go in a couple of directions. This guy right here can only go in 2 different directions. So this is your fingers being able to go like this and like this, okay? That's your condyloid joint. So we're talking about the joint in between your carpals and your proximal phalanges, okay? Oh, and let's see. What we actually call that. Metacarpal phalangeal. Isn't that cute? It's like it actually does include. So metacarpal, as in the bones of your hand, inside the palm of your hand, and your proximal phalanges, okay? So in between your hand and that first part of your fingers, that's where you have condyloid joints that let you do this and this, okay? Your saddle joint example is going to be your thumb. So it's basically able to do this and this with a little bit more going on there, right? Because it lets you do this protraction movement. The carpal metacarpal joint between trapezium and metacarpal of the thumb. I'm not going to write all that. I'm just going to write the thumb, okay? So this is between the metacarpal 1 and that proximal phalange or phalanx of the thumb is going to be your saddle joint. And finally, your ball and socket joints are going to be your shoulder and your, joints are going to be your shoulder and your hip. Okay. So now that we've got our examples, let's categorize them and color code them. Whee! So your ball and socket joints are going to be your multi-axial joints, right? Your saddle joint is going to be, is it technically biaxial? Saddle joint is technically biaxial. Your condyloid joints are biaxial. Your pivot joints are uniaxial, if I am not mistaken, indeed. Your hinge joints are uniaxial, right? So your pivot joint is moving only like in this transverse plane, right? So that rotation of that pivot is happening in one plane, as well as your hinge joint of your shoulder is only happening in this one plane. Okay, you're not breaking the boundaries of any other planes except for this plane right here when you're using your hinge joints. And then your plane joints, I don't mess everything up, are going to be your non-axial joints, because apparently this slight gliding movement doesn't even count to be like moving along a plane. It's more like a point, okay? So wasn't that fun? Look at that. We color-coded our synovial joints and got our examples and our movement types, which is pretty cool. And we color-coded the structural and functional classifications of joints in general, okay? So your fibrous and cartilaginous joints, like this is pretty much it, okay? The different types, the names of them, and whether they are synarthrotic or amphiarthrotic, and your fibrous joints are gonna be one of those. And your synovial joints are gonna be your only diarthroses, okay? And if you continue our little chart to the next page, our diarthrotic synovial joints can be broken down according to specific types of synovial joints and their movements. Okay, let me change this color so it doesn't look like the diarthrotic one. Let's make it this like hideous brown color, if you think. Yes. Okay. How do we feel about that?
Thank you so much.
This is what I did when I like first learned it. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna have to like freaking lay it out there, just lay it all down and put colors to it. Otherwise my brain will not remember. This is studying Ashley style. I'm glad it's helpful. That's good. All right, what else, you guys? We talked about a lot.
Oh, we did.
Talked about a lot already. The different types of movements, maybe. These ones get weird. Movements of synovial joints. Okay, so like, here we go. Our special movements as opposed to our angular. Don't worry about angular versus special movements. Just know the definitions of flexion versus extension, or be able to recognize them in like a weird picture like this. Excuse me. So it's always, again, you have to specify which part of the body you're talking about in order to be able to define flexion versus extension. Flexion and extension of like the knee is very straightforward. Flexion and extension of the elbow in terms of the joint, right? Very straightforward. Flexion and extension of the shoulder and of the hip are a little bit weirder, and they will make more sense in terms of when we get to the actual like names of the muscles and the types of muscles that are involved in that. So if you're talking about flexing the hip, you're probably talking about flexing the glutes, which would be like moving your whole upper leg back. So you're flexing your glutes, right? If you squeeze your glutes, you pull your leg back this way. Versus squeezing your, I guess it would be your quadriceps tendon, right? Would be extending your glutes. So you have to be very, very specific about what you're talking about. So far, we're only talking in reference to joints and not muscles. So I'm getting ahead of myself. If you're talking about a joint, it's a lot simpler. If you're flexing the elbow, the hinge joint of the elbow joint, then you're decreasing the size of the angle, right? And if you're extending the hinge joint, the elbow joint in particular, then you are increasing the size of that angle, right? So in terms of joints, it makes sense. If you're talking about your atlantoaxial.
Actually, I'm sorry, I have a question. Going back to chapter 7, I'm sorry,
It's all good. It's all
kind
good.
of re-going over this. The atlas and axis, let's see. What are their markings and functions? So I see the markings, and those are kind of simple to understand. I mean,
Kind of weird.
just remember. What are their functions? I don't remember.
So the basically we're talking about the pivot joint that they form at the base of your skull, right? So your atlas is the one that's closer to your skull, right? So this and this, these facets here, actually interact with the base of your skull and your occipital bone, okay? So your occipital bone is sitting on these two facets. The dens of the axis, which is really the main bone marking that I want you to know about the atlas and the axis, this is really like the key here. It's the dens. It's a feature of the axis, which goes up through the atlas. You can see it here coming up through the atlas. And it also interacts with the inferior aspect of the skull so that you can do this pivot or rotation motion, okay? The joint, the type of joint is a pivot joint. The type of movement that it allows you to do is rotation, okay? So if we were to take a look at this, whoa, right up his nose, this guy's atlas and axis, you can see how the atlas, these facets, are where the skull sits on here directly, right? And the dens of the axis coming up through the atlas, it's connected to the skull via soft tissue here, but allows you to move your head in a no motion, okay? So this is like a negatory, okay? So it says if it's asking you to like, or saying like, if you were to shake your head or to shake your head no, that is due to the dens of the axis, okay? The way the atlas and the axis interact. Does that clarify?
Yeah, definitely. And you said the axis, or excuse me, the atlas, that divot is where the skull sits, right?
It's right on those facets at
Okay.
the condyles right here. So these occipital condyles right next to the foramen magnum, those are this right here, which we can't really see very clearly. If I were to take this occipital bone and isolate it, you see what I'm saying? These occipital condyles right here, that is what's interacting with the facets of the atlas right here. Does that make sense? These are the occipital condyles of the occipital bone of the skull interacting with these facets on the atlas, the C2 vertebra. I'm sorry, the C.
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
Oh, cool, no problem. Huzzah! Okay. Flexion and extension. Hyperextension is extending too far, right? So you can hyperextend your knees or hyperextend your elbows. I remember when I was a little kid, they put me in gymnastics for a little while because I was super pigeon-toed. So they thought that like gymnastics might help me to like straighten my feet out. And so we would do these like horrible things with all the parents there, and like you have to like show what you learned. So then we all lined up and would do the you call it like a walkover or whatever, when you like put your hands on the ground and then like you swing your legs over. I don't even know what that's called. Something walkover. Anyway, at some point you're like doing a full-on handstand, and I remember hyperextending my elbow. And I was like, the scariest thing. It was so horrible. I was like, oh my God, like I'll never play the violin. Like I the most horrible thing ever, and it sucked. It was very painful. Anyway, don't do that. And we talked about circumduction, right? Making a cone in the air, or drawing a circle in the air, I guess would be more accurate, drawing a circle with your limbs, and also with your limbs, abduction and adduction, right? So you get abducted by aliens, so you abduct your arms away from your body or away from the midline, and you adduct, or you add them back to the midline in adduction. You can also do this with your fingers. So if you've got the midline of the hand corresponding with your middle finger, you can abduct and adduct your fingers as well. Abduct and adduct your fingers. Rotation is like rotating the bone in its socket in one plane, right? Along one axis, along its own long axis. So your atlantoaxial joint, right? The axis and atlas, the dens of the atlas allows you to do rotation of the skull, right? And then you can also rotate your humerus, like I was doing before, rotating like this. And you can do the same thing with your femur, rotating it back and forth, or just round and round, right? Really just back and forth. And if you're rotating your foot in, right? If you're like pretending like you're pigeon-toed, this is medial rotation, and this is axial or lateral rotation. Medial rotation, lateral rotation, right? Same thing with your humerus. You can have medial rotation and lateral rotation of the humerus. Supination and pronation. Supination and pronation, right? Supination, pronation. Supine and prone, right? Supine and prone. Lying prone is you're lying prone on your back, right? So your hand is kind of lying on its back like that. Okay.
Ashley, this kind of sounds like a very simple and dumb question. I just want to verify that axial skeleton is mainly for just support, right? Like support and protection.
Protection is the big one with the axial skeleton. So
Okay, and appendicular is movement.
yeah, the appendicular is movement. Exactly. Yeah. The pelvic girdle offers protection to some of the vital organs of your lower abdomen, right? But your axial skeleton is really where the important protection is happening, because you're protecting your brain, your spine, and your heart and lungs. Yes, excellent question.
Thank you.
No problem. Let's see. This thing that I just said, I'm like staring at this. This is very stupid and not correct. The image is correct. The textbook says it correctly, but that was not correct. To supinate is to go palm up. To pronate is to go palm down. I apologize for whoever made this PowerPoint. Not naming names. Okay, supination, pronation. That's better. Supination, pronation, okay? To supinate is to go from palm down to palm up, and to pronate is to go from palm up to palm down. Dorsiflexion and plantar flexion, right? So plantar flexion is pointing your toes, and dorsiflexion is the opposite. Plantar flexion, point your toes, and dorsiflexion, I don't know, extend your toes. And then you can also invert and evert the sole of your foot, right? So you can sort of do some rotation of your foot. Medially, which is inversion, and laterally, which is eversion, okay? What else? Protraction and retraction of the jaw. I keep trying to think of other things that you can protract and retract. Can you like protract and retract your finger when you're poking somebody, maybe? I don't know. I don't think so. Protract and retract your shoulders, possibly. Anyway, protraction is sticking it out, and retraction is pulling it back. Elevation and depression. Elevation is pulling up, and depression is pulling down. The other example that I thought of for this is your shoulders. So you can elevate your shoulders and depress your shoulders. Elevation, depression. The creepy example is the jaw again. So elevation and depression of the mandible. And then opposition of the thumb. So being able to do this, or snap your fingers, or basically anything that has to do with touching your thumb to the tips of your other fingers is considered opposition of the thumb. Common joint injuries, sprains and tears of the ligaments and cartilage, respectively. We can dislocate joints entirely, which is also known as a luxation. Subluxation is only partial dislocation. You can have inflammation of the bursae in your joints, right? So the bursae of your joints. Oh, I didn't finish talking about the parts of the synovial joint. That's what I should do. So you have a synovial cavity full of synovial fluid, articular cartilage at the distal end of the proximal bone and the proximal end of the distal bone. That's really fun practice. See if you can identify the which is the proximal and distal bone, and which end of the bones are involved in the joint, which is the proximal end and which is the distal end of the distal and proximal joint or bones. Fun little brain teaser in case you're looking for something like that. I know you're not, so I'm sorry. And then so you have a joint cavity full of, or a synovial cavity full of synovial fluid, articular cartilage capping the ends of the bones involved in the joint, and the joint capsule, which is usually made of ligaments, right? They can be, they'll be capsular ligaments if they are making up that joint capsule. The last thing, oh, right, reinforcing ligaments. I didn't ask you to memorize any of them except for the ones of the knee. There were 4 reinforcing ligaments of the knee that I wanted you to know. Some reinforcing ligaments are, like I said, capsular, so they're actually part of the synovial capsule. Some are extra capsular, so they are outside of the capsule. This might be an example. And some are intracapsular, which means that they are inside of the capsule. They're in here somewhere, okay? And again, this image of a synovial joint is a like super generalized imaginary joint that has all of the parts of a synovial joint, okay? The last thing was a rich nerve and blood supply. So joint capsule, synovial fluid, articular cartilage, joint cavity and joint capsule. Then you've got your reinforcing ligaments and a rich blood and nerve supply. In terms of the knee and those reinforcing ligaments, let's take another look at those. So here's our knee joint, another synovial joint, got all those parts, articular cartilage, synovial cavity full of synovial fluid, a joint capsule, which you can see on the back of the knee, but not so much on the anterior side of the knee. That's just because the knee is weird that way. You've got then our reinforcing ligaments. These ones are, of course, intracapsular, right? Because they're inside of the joint cavity. This is considered an extracapsular. Actually, this ligament here would be extracapsular. This is a tendon, so it's not technically any kind of capsular ligament. You've also got your bursae, right? So here's a bursa, here's a bursa. This is also a bursa right here. And they are also full of synovial fluid. And they basically just allow, like in this instance, the skin and the patella to slip past each other. It allows this patellar ligament to slip over the rest of the knee joint. This one allows the quadriceps tendon to slip over the femur up here. So here's 2 out of the 4 reinforcing ligaments of the knee. You have the anterior and posterior cruciate ligaments. In this image, you can see them sort of cut off here, but you have the anterior and the posterior cruciate ligaments because they cross over each other inside of the middle of the knee, okay? That's why they're intracapsular. These menisci are also an important aspect of the knee joint because they basically just add padding to where the condyles of the femur interact with the top of the tibia here, here, and here. All right, so those cruciate ligaments, right? One crossing in front, one crossing in back. Anterior cruciate ligament and posterior cruciate ligament. And then the other 2 are the lateral ligaments, okay? So they're collateral ligaments. One is lateral or fibular, and the other is medial or tibial, okay? So basically interacting or attached to the corresponding bone. Since the fibula is always lateral, then we know that this is the fibular or the lateral collateral ligament. And since this one's attached to the tibia, we know that it is the tibial or medial collateral ligament. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Anterior and posterior cruciate ligaments, fibular and tibial collateral ligaments of the knee joint. Those are the only reinforcing ligaments that I want you to know the names of, okay? We talked about all the other hinge and ball and socket joints in not as much detail, and I don't want you to know nearly or any of the detail that you know for the knee for those guys, except that those structures, most of those structures exist for them. You don't have menisci in your ball and socket joints, nor in your elbow joint, because you're not like constantly causing shock to your elbow joint, hopefully.
Ashley,
Go for it.
for the scapula markings, everything that's on that slide you want us to know too, right? I can give you the slide number. Hold on.
I got it. It's right here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. These ones are all out of your lab manual. Yeah. And they're not that bad. They're really not that bad because you have, first of all, you have 3 borders. Okay. You got 3 borders. You have a superior border. You have a medial border, which you know is medial because it's vertebral. It's close to your vertebral column. Okay. And your axillary border, which is your lateral border. So that's 1, 2, 3 borders. You have 2 angles, a superior angle and an inferior angle. Okay, so just basically like pointy bits on the flat part of your scapula. And then on the anterior, you also have 3 fossae, right? You have 3 like sort of like scooped out regions. You have a subscapular fossa. So basically it's underneath your scapula when it is associated with the rest of your skeleton, right? So that subscapular fossa is under here, under the scapula, okay? The other 2 fossae have to do with the spine on the posterior side of the scapula. You have a supraspinous fossa above the spine and an infraspinous fossa below the spine. Then you have the spine itself. And the only part that I feel like is really, really weird are these 2 processes right here, this one and this one. The acromion process is going to interact with the acromial end of the clavicle, right? I'm not misspeaking here. Yes, acromion. Okay, so see how that is the process that's associated with the spine. Okay, that's the acromion process interacting with the clavicle. The other weird process there is the coracoid process, okay, which is going to be here. It's going to be anterior and inferior to the acromion process, but really just if you can remember that the acromion process is the one that interacts with the clavicle and is associated with the spine, then you know that the other one is the coracoid process. And then the last thing is this glenoid cavity right here. That's the last one. Those are the markings that I have here. Yeah. So it looks like a lot. It's not too terrible. 3 borders, 2 angles, 3 fossae, which are named according to where they are. The only really weird thing are these 2 processes, the acromion and the coracoid process. And then you have the glenoid fossa or glenoid cavity. Okay?
Okay, yeah, the way you explained the 3 corners, that helps. Just like start from there and then work your way out.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
This I feel like might be a little hard to interpret. Okay. All right, you guys. What else? Talked about the knee joint. Different types of degenerative joint diseases. There are basically 3 different types of arthritis that we talked about. We talked about osteoarthritis, which is the basically the wear and tear. It's like the cartilage. It's like the cartilage version of osteoporosis, right? So osteoporosis is just like the general breakdown of bone as you age, and osteoarthritis is the general breakdown of cartilage as you age. So you've got wear and tear in all of your joints. And it's related to the normal aging process. You've got rheumatoid arthritis, which is actually an autoimmune disease. So it's actually your own immune system attacking you at your joints as well as in other places. So you usually have other symptoms besides just joint pain and swelling. You also will have anemia, you'll have osteoporosis, muscle weakness, and cardiovascular problems, just because the immune system is attacking the self, right? And then lastly, gouty arthritis is when you have uric acid crystals being deposited into the joints, okay? More common in men, usually starts at the joint at the base of the big toe. So there was that, we looked up a picture of that crazy, like the bend and the lump that they get at the base of their big toe on that medial edge of the foot. In all types of arthritis, you can end up with bones fusing, which is called ankylosis. I thought I saw it somewhere. Ankylosis, I don't know. But that's when the articulating bones like ossify together and you lose all mobility. So for all of the types of arthritis, it is recommended that you try and maintain some mobility by doing like little physical therapy, movement kind of stuff to try and keep this from happening. All right, you guys, it's 10 till 5. Any other questions?
I think I'm good.
I think you're all doing okay, feeling a little bit better about some of this stuff, I hope.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll come back 5:30 to 6:30 to see if anybody's here. If there isn't anybody here by like, I don't know, by like 6 o'clock, I might peace out. And if that sounds okay with you guys, that's what I'll do. We did record this, and I'm really glad that we did. Thank you for reminding me. I will post it post haste. And I will look at Canvas and make sure that I have your guys' grades looking more normalized so that you guys have an idea of where you stand and so that you can look at it after your exam and see. But again, remember that your exams will need to be graded again by me on Monday to make sure that I add points for things that you misspelled on the lab exam or for weird questions that could have snuck by on the lecture exam, stuff like that. So
Okay.
again, don't panic if you get a crazy low score, especially on the lab exam, because I can only put in so many variations on the correct answers. So I'm sure that there will be many more that I missed and that I'll have to go in and add points for. So don't panic. I will do that on Monday. And then I will see you on Tuesday so that we can start on our muscles. We can start on muscles on May 5th. It'll be May. It's gonna be May. So
Britney Spears, that's what it sounded like.
it's Justin Timberlake.
It sounded like Britney Spears' voice, though.
Did I sang a Justin Timberlake song in a Britney Spears voice? I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm
Knee slapper. Didn't they date?
like a total late millennial thing. I'm a very late millennial. All right, you guys.
Thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Thank you for all of your understanding and patience with all of this, always and forever. And yeah, I'll see you at 5:30 if that's a thing. If not, then best of luck to you on your exams. Let me know if you have last minute like technical problems or questions. Don't wait till the last minute. Let me know. We'll troubleshoot. Don't panic, and you guys you'll do great. All right. So
Thank you.
share, and I'm gonna end the meeting. So bye.
When are you gonna post this video?
As soon as I can. It'll take a little while to convert into MP4 or whatever.
Okay.
And I have to upload it to YouTube, which takes however long that takes. And so
Okay.
give me a couple hours.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.